It was the first time I'd been back to the old cabin since we buried my sister, Maggie. I know that might sound strange. Why would anyone return to a place where they'd lost someone they loved? But for me, there was no choice. The cabin had always been our sanctuary, our refuge from the world. My parents built it when we were kids. A small rustic house nestled on the edge of White Oak Ridge in the Appalachian Mountains. It was our place, quiet, untouched by modern life, where the only sound was the wind rustling through the trees and the crackle of the fire at night. But Maggie, she had always been different. She had this strange fascination with the woods surrounding our cabin, a pull to the darkness that I never fully understood. I told myself it was just her wild imagination, the sort of thing kids have when they spend too much time isolated. But when she started disappearing into the woods at night, when she started talking about things that weren't there, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was off. Something was calling her. Then one night, she went into those woods for the last time. She never came back. When they found her body 3 days later, the authorities were baffled. No signs of struggle. No indication of how she died. The only thing they found was her broken wristwatch, lying in the dirt beside her. It was as though she'd simply collapsed, as if her heart had stopped without warning. And that was it. No answers. Just silence. I had left the cabin for good after that. The grief and confusion, too much to bear. But now, years later, I felt compelled to return. It wasn't for closure. Nothing could give me that. But something had been gnawing at me, an itch in the back of my mind. I needed to understand. I needed to know what had happened to Maggie. The drive up the mountain was long and winding, the sun sinking behind the hills as I approached the cabin. As I passed the familiar landmarks, the broken bridge, the old trail markers, the large oak tree that had stood in the yard since we were kids, I felt the weight of the years pressing down on me. I hadn't realized how much I'd avoided this place until now. The cabin itself stood much as it always had, though the years hadn't been kind to it. The porch was sagging in places, and the once bright wood was now weathered, its golden hue replaced by the gray of age. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and a chill of nostalgia swept over me, mixing with something else, something colder. The smell of dust, old wood, and the faint, musty scent of mildew filled my lungs. I stepped inside, letting the memories wash over me. The worn couch by the fireplace, the kitchen table where Maggie and I had played board games for hours, the narrow staircase that led to the 2 bedrooms. Everything was exactly as I remembered it, down to the smallest detail. Except for one thing. There was a mark on the wall near the stairs, a deep gouge, as if something had scratched the wood with great force. It was recent, fresh. I walked over to it, my heart racing, and ran my fingers over the scratch. It wasn't from the normal wear and tear of a cabin in the woods. No, this felt deliberate, like something had tried to carve its way into the wall. Suddenly, the air grew cold. A sharp, unnatural chill that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I turned quickly, expecting to see someone or something standing behind me, but the room was empty. Still, that was when I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound coming from upstairs. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The scratching continued, slow and rhythmic, like fingernails dragging across wood. It's just the wind, I told myself. It's just the house settling. But then I remembered Maggie and how she described hearing the same sound when she was younger, saying it came from the attic. Of course, I dismissed it back then, thinking it was just another childish fantasy. But now, in the silence of the cabin, it felt all too real. Against every instinct I had, I made my way to the stairs. The scratching grew louder as I ascended, my feet heavy on each step. The air grew colder, the shadows thicker. The house seemed to be holding its breath, as if it were waiting for something or someone. At the top of the stairs, I hesitated. The attic door was directly in front of me, a wooden trapdoor with a rusty metal handle. The scratching was unmistakable now, louder and faster, as if whatever was up there was trying to break free. I reached out with trembling hands and pulled the handle. The door creaked open with an unnatural groan, revealing the darkness of the attic beyond. I could see nothing, just blackness, as though the space inside had swallowed up all light. "Hello?" I called, my voice shaky. "Is someone up there?" No answer. Just the scratch, scratch, scratch. I stepped into the attic, my flashlight trembling in my grip. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing old furniture, forgotten boxes, and cobwebs thick as blankets. But then I saw it. At the far corner of the room, beside the window, was a tall black shape. At first I thought it was a shadow, but the longer I looked, the more it seemed to move. It was vaguely human in shape, but stretched and twisted in ways that made my stomach churn. "It's not real," I told myself. "It's just your mind playing tricks on you. It's the grief, the memories." But then it shifted. It was real. I could see the outline of a figure, a woman, or something that resembled one, standing perfectly still in the corner. Her face was pale, almost gray, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare through me. And the scratching sound? It came from her. Her fingers, long and sharp, dragged across the floor as though trying to reach out. The air thickened, pressing in on me, suffocating me with its oppressive weight. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I could do was watch as the figure took a slow step forward, its movements jerky and unnatural. The floor creaked under its weight, though no one had touched it. And then it spoke. "Help me." The voice was soft, a whisper carried on the wind, but it was unmistakably Maggie's. I could hear her in those words, her voice twisted with pain, with desperation. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering in my chest. My mind screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, trapped in the suffocating air of the attic. The figure took another step, and another, its fingers twitching as if trying to grasp something, anything. It reached out toward me, the air around it crackling with static. "Please." I finally found my legs. I turned and bolted for the stairs, barely managing to keep my footing as I rushed back down. The sound of footsteps following me, closer, louder. The walls seemed to bend and shift as I descended, the house groaning as though it were alive, suffocating me. I burst through the front door, gasping for air. My breath came in ragged sobs as I backed away from the cabin, my eyes never leaving the door. And then, for a brief moment, I saw it. The figure, standing at the doorway, its hand reaching toward me, its eyes locked on mine. But it wasn't Maggie anymore. It was something else. Something that had taken her. Something ancient, hungry. The door slammed shut, and the world fell into silence. The aftermath. I left White Oak Ridge that night and never returned. I couldn't. There was no closure, no answers. I don't know what Maggie encountered in those woods. I don't know what came back with her. But whatever it was still there, waiting in the shadows of that cabin. I never told anyone what happened. How could I? They'd never believe me. But every so often, when the wind picks up and the trees start to whisper, I hear it again. The scratching, the call, the voice. And I know it's still out there, waiting for the next person to wander too close to the hollow of White Oak Ridge